Well, welcome back to Streets and Eats. This is episode 69, and today we're talking about one of my favorite places on earth, Cappadocia, Turkey. I love Turkey, and Cappadocia is probably one of my favorite places within the country. So I can't wait to talk to you about it today.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries in all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. I really love Turkey too, and so the trivia question that I have come up with might be surprising to some people. I'll be surprised if you don't get it correct.
Me?
Yes.
Well, I do know a lot about Turkey.
Okay. Well, it's not about Turkey. This is about the world.
Oh, it's about the world. Well, that's a different story.
And I'll make it a little bit harder for you. So you have to think a little bit about it. What do you think are the top 3 tea drinking countries in the world?
Well, tea is a very popular drink. China.
That's one.
Well, I want to say Turkey, but it's probably not Turkey just because.
I'll count that as 2.
That would be a trick question, right? I don't know. I think every culture has some kind of tea that they drink. So that's just very hard.
So you have to think about which ones drink more than others.
I'm going to say Great Britain.
Okay.
Even though it's a small nation, so I don't know. And Russia.
Okay. So you're not going to say Turkey.
And Turkey.
That's 4. So, okay, put them in order. Which one's first?
China.
And then?
Great Britain. And then Turkey. And then Russia.
Okay. Well, in actuality.
Am I wrong?
You did okay. But I think you fell for the common misperception trap or misconception trap. China is not in the top 3.
It's not.
It is not in the top 3.
Well, they drink tea, tons of tea.
Yes, that's true. But according to World Atlas and several different tea companies who've done studies and track these things.
Or maybe they're looking for the dollars.
I don't know about that. I think it's based on consumption. And the pounds. It's based on consumption. Turkey is number 1.
Turkey is number 1.
Yes.
That's interesting because it has a great coffee culture too.
They do. That's true. But their tea culture is definitely far outstrips
and
the coffee culture.
And they do drink a lot of tea. There's no doubt about that.
One of my favorite things about Turkish restaurants is the tea that they offer you afterwards. And I'm so upset every time I go to a Turkish restaurant. This typically happens outside of Turkey, where they don't offer you. Or not just
outside of Turkey. Sometimes in Istanbul or those higher touristy places as well. But go on. I know what you're going to say. So.
Where they don't offer you that free tea after the meal. I mean, it's just like...
It should be a given.
It's a given. It's got to be done. So Turkey is number 1. People drink, on average, close to 7 pounds of tea annually. And tea is pretty light, so that's a lot of tea.
Actually. Because I know that when you're in a grocery store there, looking at the tea aisle, they're huge bags. And yeah, I mean, everybody I know that lives in Turkey drinks, even when we lived there, we drank more tea in Turkey definitely than anywhere else we've lived in the world.
For sure.
Because like you said, partially because they always give you a free tea at the end of your meal. If it's a real Turkish restaurant, it's not just catering to tourists, because then, that skews everything, just so you know. But also, I mean, we just loved it. So, I mean, we
would make it at home.
I don't think we made it at home that much.
I like it enough to make it at home, but we wouldn't drink enough of it to make a full pot, just occasionally when people are coming over.
But what we did do is be invited at a lot of Turkish homes where it was, of course, the very first thing that's offered to you.
Yeah, well, they make a big pot and they just keep it going and it's always there. So in the restaurants, especially, they've got the big pot going for everybody, including the guests and the workers. Everybody's drinking tea. So yeah, why wouldn't you just give a glass to somebody?
And back in the old days, like when I lived in Turkey the very second time, I don't remember the first time.
You were too young.
When I was in middle school, I did a lot of travel around Turkey with my family and with the school. The school had what they called a host nation club, and we did a lot of travel with the host nation club.
That's cool.
And we did go into Turkish chai houses all the time. And traditionally, Turkish chai houses are for men, even today. You don't see a whole lot of women in Turkish chai houses. Now, you'll see cafes. That's different. Those are cafes.
Right.
But a chai house is traditionally men. But even back in the day, we would go into the chai houses. And back then, they still give you tons of sugar with your tea today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the side of it. Back then, the sugar cubes were much larger than they are today. They were about an inch long, but the same.
Huge.
The rest of it was same, but it was about an inch long. And then what a lot of people would do is they would, especially the older generation, they would take that sugar cube and they would put it between their teeth and they would sip their tea through the sugar that way.
Interesting.
Which, of course, was horrible for
your teeth.
for your dental hygiene, but it would taste good, of course. But anyway, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I just love those big sugar cubes. I have to break them in half because it's too much for me. But those are becoming harder and harder to find.
Yeah.
Now you get the little tubes of sugar, and it's just not quite the same.
Well, you get tubes or you get regular sized sugar cubes. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just it's like anything else. It's
But I can't drink that
global
much sugar
economy.
anyway, so that's okay. Well, in case anybody out there is wondering, number 2 was Ireland,
Ireland.
just under 5 pounds per person.
Wow.
And number 3 was United Kingdom, which was just over 4 pounds per person. China doesn't come on the list.
I think it's interesting that Ireland would beat out the rest of like that whole, group of islands and countries. That's weird.
China doesn't make the list, the top 10 list.
Wow. I'm just in shock, to be honest.
You didn't say Japan. Japan drinks a ton of tea
Well,
too.
yeah, I didn't say Japan. I mean, the thing is, everywhere we've been, I'm trying to think of a place that doesn't drink tea.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty common. Russia was on the top 10 list too. Well, I love a good tea. I love a good restaurant. But I have to say my favorite place in all of Turkey and maybe in the world, it definitely is in my top 5 worldwide locations, is Cappadocia. Hands down. I just love that whole region.
Well, it's got such history. It's so unique because of all the very chimneys and the formations, and it's friendly, it's inexpensive. And we used to go, gosh, I think we would go at least 3 times a year when we lived in Turkey.
Yeah. That is definitely one place we would go back to over and over and over again. There's not a lot of places I can say that about. Once I've been somewhere, oftentimes, yeah, I've seen it. I've done it. I loved it. Do I need to go back? No, not really. But every time we went back to Cappadocia, we had not necessarily a completely different experience, but there's also always something different to see. Anytime the light is different or the weather is different, you get different colors in the geological formations. It's just incredible.
And we love the people. We had lots of friends there that we would go to the same restaurant so we could go see our friends. And we had a rug merchant that was a really good friend of ours who would play the saws for us. I mean,
And service tea.
And service tea, of course. Of course. I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love it.
Yeah. For me, it's like the perfect storm of geology, history, culture, and just, like you said, the friendliness of the Turks.
Yeah.
And the food.
Actually, I mean, it's very touristy too. It can be very touristy because that's where a lot of people go with good reason.
Yep.
And
they need to go there.
And that was probably one of the reasons that you'd think I wouldn't like it, because it's not really something I normally go to, but they do it well. They do it really well. Yeah. I love that place.
And it's easy enough to get away from people that even though it can get crowded, you can be the only person for miles in a lot of areas. So where is Cappadocia?
Cappadocia is basically, I don't know if it's smack dab in the center of Turkey, but it's close enough. It's right in the middle of the central Anatolian plain, and it is 4 hours drive from Ankara. I know for a fact because we've done it multiple times. It's about a 2.5 or 3 hour drive from Adana and the Mediterranean coast.
Yeah.
And really, if you go east from there, you're in the backcountry of Turkey, total backcountry. But if you go west from there, it's much more populated, much more popular places to go, things like that.
Yeah, I think I just pulled up the map to look and refresh my memory. Yeah, I mean, it's not exact center of the country, but it is really darn close.
Pretty close. And one of the things, if you're looking at a map of the country that you can see that's nearby, I think it's about an hour away, maybe more, is Tuzgalu, which is one of my favorite things to go by whenever we were driving from Ankara to Cappadocia. And that Tuzgalu is Salt Lake, their big Salt Lake. And it's just beautiful at sunrise and sunset. One time we went there during May and the flamingos were there. They were in flight. They were eating. It was just fabulous. Like everything about that lake is really cool.
Yeah, it's on the migratory path.
It is, yeah.
The flamingos.
So the flamingos aren't there all year long. They were just there in May, and I think they're there every May.
So middle of the country, it is still pretty easy to get to. It's connected by highways, of course. There are bus tours, overnight tours that you can take from
just about
all
anywhere
around Turkey. You can fly in. There is an airport in the area that you can get flights regularly out of Istanbul.
So
easy to get to.
It's really easy to get to. It's very popular. You can take a tour to get there and not have to do the legwork yourself. But even if you do, I mean, taking a bus, the luxury buses are very nice, and you can go by bus or you can go by plane or you can rent a car. Driving there is not a problem. It's pretty much good road all the way to Cappadocia.
Yeah, it really is. And having a car in the region
is really nice.
Is really nice. And we had a Jeep. A 4-wheel drive Patriot, not like an off-road Jeep or anything like that, but a little bit extra clearance and that 4-wheel drive, which I don't think we ever really needed to put it in 4-wheel drive. But having the clearance and having the ruggedness was really cool because there are just little tracks and dirt roads that just crisscross the region, and they're open roads. It's not like a private property or anything. So you can go out and exploring on the roads and get to some incredible places, some churches that you could never get to otherwise without hiking or being on a tour where they take you there. But just being able to drive around on the roads and kind of get lost in the scenery, finding something new all the time. I just love that. And so, yeah, having a car, I think, is the best way to do it.
And maybe you hit the nail on the head. One of the main reasons we love it so much is you can explore and explore and explore. And even if you've been to that exact place over, like Uchisar Castle, for example, I mean, Uchisar is probably the most popular thing to do. It's a huge formation.
Rock formation coming up out of the ground that's mountain sized.
Yeah, it's
or
huge.
At least a very large hill sized.
And so everybody goes there. There's the gauntlet of tourist souvenir shops as you're walking down the street. You can ride a camel right there. It's very touristy. But even Uchisar, which is probably the most touristic thing to do while you're there, is just amazing at different times of the year. In the snow, it's different than in the spring with the cherry blossoms. And I mean, it's just mind-boggling. There's always something to do and people to meet. And I don't know. I just really love it.
Well, so that's how you get there. We have kind of hinted at one of the features of it, like you talk about Uchisar Castle being this big rock. But what we didn't say was, and where it really becomes mysterious and fascinating, is that rock, that Uchisar rock, has been carved out inside into like this rabbit warren of rooms and windows looking out for defensive purposes. And the whole thing is like honeycombed, not naturally, man-made, into this kind of castle type thing.
Well, and for thousands of years, people have lived in the fairy chimneys. I don't know how many people know that.
It's true, yeah.
They're dwellings. And not only are there dwellings, but as a lot of people know, there's also underground cities of them, which is kind of made out of the same stuff. It's just that it's not above ground. And to me, they're claustrophobic, but I've been in them a number of times. I remember the first time I went in Derinkuyu, I believe, It was more touristy than it is today. And they used to have a little cafe underground. I think I told you this. I was like 13 years old, and they had like these blue and red disco lights. And it was like, you'd sit down. They had little tables and chairs, the little stools, and you would sit down and you would have your glass of chai and whatever, some Turkish delight or whatever. And I remember doing that as a 13-year-old thinking, this is so cool. People used to live here. They hid out here during the Crusades and during when the Ottomans were oppressing the Christians and blah, 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 blah. But look at me. I'm inside having tea. How cool. It was really cool, I have to say.
That's really neat.
I wasn't as claustrophobic back then.
Well, the whole area it's a volcanic area. And so the whole area in that part of it was like just covered hundreds and hundreds of feet deep of volcanic ash and all that stuff that just kind of spews out of a volcano. Not hard lava, but just the sediment that collected and collected and collected. And as that kind of evolved geologically, you ended up with different layers of hardness of rock and softness of rock. And so as the ground started eroding around it, you end up with these chimneys. They look just like towers sticking up out of the ground, where the ground all around that chimney eroded, but left this tower just standing up. And you go up some valleys and there'll be hundreds of these towers standing 50 feet, 100 feet tall. And yeah, it was so soft that you could dig into it and you could carve out the inside and make a dwelling out of that.
But it was also safe.
Yeah, because after
it was still structured.
After you cut it out and it was exposed to the air, it would harden, and it still does today. And in fact, a lot of the cave hotels in Goreme, that's exactly what they've done. It's the oldest, I think, building technique, maybe known to man, as far as not just living in a cave, like a natural cave. And so those are really cool.
And that's a big thing to do when you're in Cappadocia, is to stay in a cave hotel. And most of the ones that we've stayed in all have like very Turkish motif, sultanish, furniture, and they do it very well. And the breakfasts are always amazing at those hotels too.
Yeah.
Turkish kahvaltı, Turkish breakfast is amazing in and of itself.
Definitely.
Anyway.
So yeah, for thousands of years, they've been living in these, carving them out and living in them, using them for defensive purposes, whatever. And then the underground cities are areas where the ground is flat. They dug down like hundreds of feet, multiple levels, as a way to escape marauding Mongols, Seljuks, whoever happened to be coming through the area,
which was
whoever
plenty,
happened to be living there. Probably the most famous and long-term groups of people were the Byzantine and the early Christians who were escaping persecution. Those underground cities are incredible. But given that religious background, you can imagine that they would also carve out these fairy chimneys and turn them into churches. And so that's the other really incredible thing to do there, is go visit those, 7th century, 8th century churches that have the most beautiful
frescoes,
mosaics and frescoes still inside them today.
Yeah. And in fact, the most popular is World Heritage Site. It's Goreme National Park. And well, Goreme itself is probably my favorite city of the whole place, although we have lots of favorites down there. And the name for Goreme, it was like about the third or fourth name for the town, because that town's been inhabited for thousands and thousands of years. And Goreme itself means one cannot see and hear. And it basically is talking about how people are safe there because you can't see that they're there. And it's true. Those things are dark. The cave hotels we've stayed in some that have had windows, and we've stayed in a couple of rooms that did not have windows. The ones that didn't have windows, I mean, it is pitch dark. Yep. The ones that do have windows, of course, you've got a little bit of ambient light, but they all come with wooden shutters. You shut those shutters and you're back to pitch darkness again. I mean, it's pretty impressive, to say the least.
Blackout. Yeah, so you can imagine what it would be like living in
with candlelight anyway.
Before electricity and just candlelight. Yeah, that would be amazing.
And speaking of which, that's another thing that I think a lot of people may not know. Now, most of the area is protected and you can't, of course, live in it anymore. But there are some parts that are not protected. And there are some parts where people are still using those same formations, and they have things like garages and they keep their farm equipment in there, or they still, there are a few that are still houses, but not as many. I think it's more like a storage area or what do you call that? Like a root cellar or a machinery place.
Or even a barn for animals.
A barn for animals, that kind of thing. So
we did also see a police station inside of one.
We did.
And I think that's still there outside of Goreme.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there are plenty of things that are in there that are more modern because it's part of the allure, but it's part of the taking care of it as well.
It's just the way people live now, too. Yeah. Still living there that same way. That's true.
Well, when is the best time to go to Cappadocia? I would say that the high season, like anywhere else, is midsummer. And that is a fantastic time to go because everything, of course, is open. But not just that. You have all the kinds of outdoor activities that happen. We've ridden ATVs. We've ridden horses. There's, of course, the hot air balloons. We have never ridden the hot air balloon there because they don't have smaller ones. They only have larger ones for like 15 people, and you still pay $250 to $300 a person. So we haven't done that, but we do love seeing the balloons up in the morning. We've taken tons and tons of pictures, and we hear them, releasing the gas into the balloon, and it's like they're breathing almost. It's pretty cool.
The hiking in the area is incredible. There's several different valleys that kind of go up around the Goreme area that are closed to, that they're not developed at all. So they're just hiking areas, and to hike through these formations is just incredible. That's always fun to do. And summer's just a good time. It does get hot.
But the nice thing is at night, if you're in a cave hotel, it is such a nice temperature with no air conditioning.
Yeah. And because you're at such a good altitude, it does cool off pretty good at night too.
Well, it's just the cave hotels
and caves are naturally cooler by themselves.
Exactly. So a lot of people go in the summer. I'm going to say for us, I have been in the summer. I'm sure Jim has been in the summer. I couldn't tell you how many times, but we tended to go during the other seasons of the year. We've been in winter a couple of times, and it does snow in Cappadocia, and to see the fairy chimneys covered in snow is just magical. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just magical. And then spring,
you may not get out and hike as much, and you can't drive on as many of the side or back areas as you could in other seasons, but it is still super beautiful. It's stunning.
And it seems like pretty much all the restaurants and the hotels are still open. We never had a problem getting, going there. And I think, anytime you travel off season, the people appreciate you that much more because
they really do.
Because, that's their low season. And just to see a few faces come in and order some great meals and stuff really makes a difference to their lives. So we really enjoyed doing that. We enjoyed winter. It was very cozy. A lot of the cave hotels, I won't say a lot of the cave hotels, but some of the cave hotels will have a fireplace so you can warm up that way. But we rarely used them. You just kind of go to the common area and sit and chat with people because, and drink chai. But spring and fall are both like really beautiful times to go. And there's a lot of places in the valleys that are still being, utilized. Like there's people farming in between these fairy chimneys. So you can, it depends on what they're growing, but we've met lots of farmers tilling and having chai on the side of the field, and we just sit and talk to them and talk about the area. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. It's not for fall. It's not like some areas where there's a lot of fall colors.
No,
because it's not a forested area.
There is a little bit. There are some trees.
There is some color. So that's beautiful. Late spring is, I think, the best time to go. Early spring, the roads, those side roads, those back roads are still a little muddy, and it can be a little difficult to really explore everywhere. But by late spring, those have dried up. There's still some greenery and some flowers, and it's just an incredible time to go. It's not hot yet. so you can easily get out and walk around. They've started up a lot of the other outdoor activities, like you said, the four-wheeling and the horseback riding.
Yeah, you're not really going to get that other than kind of more high seasons
Right.
or right on the shoulder, maybe. But they definitely shut down. They're seasonal, so yeah.
Like May to September is the only time we get.
I think the balloons go all year long.
Yeah.
Depending, but of course that's weather related. So if there is a snowstorm or if there's a rainstorm, then that's going to shut that down, at least for that day. So you're more apt to have that as opposed to a hot, dry summer. So summer's the time to go if you want to. Well, especially if you like the heat anyway, or if that's when you have a lot of time. But it's also when you can do a lot more, like activities.
Yeah, we never have done the hot air balloons, like you said. But what I do love doing is getting up early in the morning. And like if you're staying in a cave hotel in Goreme, a lot of them are in kind of the outer cliffs that ring the village. It's kind of like in a bowl surrounded by these cliffs that have been all carved into hotels and stuff. But there's paths that you can climb up to the top, and it looks out over the launching area for the balloons. So you get up there early and you just kind of hang out and you can watch the whole process. And, watching a hot air balloon fill up with air in the early morning, that's one of the coolest sights to begin with. But then when you got like 10 or 20 of them all launching at about the same time from the same area, and then they come up and they just slowly drift over, depending on which way the wind's blowing. The one morning I was up there, they were drifting right over where I was sitting on the top of this hill, like only 10 or 20 feet away in some cases, which to me would be very scary in the balloon. But sitting there watching it, it was incredible. And of course, it's not just the balloons. It's the fairy chimneys and, everything all around you that's now being lit by that golden sunlight of the sunrise. Just incredible. You definitely have to do that. The things to do in the area, the Goreme Open Air Museum with all the churches
is a must.
You have to go there. If you can, or if that's the sort of thing that you enjoy doing, the hot air balloons over the fairy chimneys, that's a one of a kind thing to do.
I think that's on a lot of people's bucket lists.
If you like horseback riding, get on a horse, go up some of those valleys. It's a completely different experience than hiking it. Of course, it's much easier as far as how much sweat you're going to break out. And it's just a lot of fun. Even I like riding horses, even though I put up usually a little bit of a fight every time we do it. Once I'm on the horse's back, I love it. I have a good time.
We've ridden ATVs through the formations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not ones that are popular. They're the ones they take you out when you're riding your horse, or if you're on an ATV, are more the formations that are just still there, and they're in the valley. I mean, you can go explore them if you want, and some of them have carved out rooms, and some of them even have a few frescoes in them, like they'll have a cross or something. But they're not enough of a draw to make them a tourist site. So that's the kind of things that they take you around. So it's really pretty. You still get to be around the formations, but you're doing something, ultra fun at the same time.
That's right. And you're not going out in areas where there are a lot of other hikers and horseback riders. So you're not bothering anybody else while you're doing it. So they do it really well, I think. Of course, the hiking, Pigeon Valley is really famous, and Rose Valley is really famous.
Pigeon Valley, we have a nice little story there. One time we were just hanging out and wandering around Pigeon Valley, and here we find a guy who's he's the pigeon man. And there's a lot of Turks that own pigeons, and then they have homing pigeons, and so they go and they feed them every morning, and then they let them go, and then the pigeons will go up in the air, and then they'll circle around, making sure they know where they're at. That's why they're called homing pigeons. They'll fly off and then they'll come back. And I mean, here we are, just happenstance. We're in Pigeon Valley, which I thought was an appropriate name for it when we were there. And here's this guy who comes to feed us pigeons. And we talked to him. We had chai with him. And so the whole experience was just phenomenal. It's just something that it's serendipitous. You just kind of walk into, and it's amazing. And we were there, I'm going to say a good hour at least. And we had chai, and he told us about his pigeons. I mean, a lot of this, you have to understand, our Turkish is not that great, and his English certainly wasn't that great. I mean, He wasn't a tour guide or anything. So it's a lot of hand gestures, and I don't know how you communicate, but you do. And we were there and we watched him go through all his ministrations and saw all the birds and everything. He told us a few of their names and he released them. We didn't touch them or anything. And then we had chai with the guy. It was just so cool. So that's why I think it's one of my favorite things that Cappadocia is good at. The people will invite you to have chai with them. They will talk to you. I mean, obviously the tourists, the people there to make a buck are there to make a buck. You can see the difference.
For sure. Well, what you didn't mention about those pigeons was when he released them the very first time, they would come out of their coop, and I guess as a way of like stretching or just like celebrating the fact that they're out, they would fly up into the air, flap, 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 and then they would like do flips in the air.
That's true. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's way cool. I mean, we couldn't believe it. We've never seen anything like it. And they have pigeon people all over the world, but this is the only
flips before.
This is the only time we ever experienced it to that degree. It was really, really, really neat.
Well, and we mentioned staying in a cave hotel and, going out and exploring on your own. But you can also, in any of the hotels, really, they've got contacts who can take you on a day tour to pretty much anywhere. If you want to just go out and explore in someone's four-wheel drive vehicle, you can set that up. If you're not sure about the routes to take for hiking, they've got maps that they'll give with you, or you can go on a group hike and hike with groups through the valleys as well. Small groups, like 6 or 8 people. So it's not like you're all trooping through in an army or anything like that. So that's a good way to do it too. One of the things we loved to do there, and we're not big shoppers, but we would go to...
Yeah, it's true.
We would go to the markets in the area and look for carpets and Keelim and the different rugs. And I think the most cool find that we made and purchase that we made were these little stools, little wooden stools that this guy had come up with the design for all on his own. It's almost like a scissor shape, but they don't collapse. I've definitely seen those little stools that kind of collapse and flatten out in a scissor shape. It's kind of like that shape, but then they're padded and covered with old Keelim. So they're like the most beautiful things, and they make great little stools. They make great little footrests. We bought several of those, and those are things we drag around the world with us.
They sure are. But that's not what I thought you were going to say. I think of all the carpets and Keelims, we bought the majority of them in the Cappadocia.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of rug shops that we really, really love there. And every time you go to a rug shop, it's kind of the same experience. So you have to be a little bit discerning on where you go. And we kind of trusted them more than we did, like, say, places in Istanbul. Your cost difference buying a rug in Cappadocia to buying in Istanbul is going to be, just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You can't even imagine.
Completely different.
But anyway, so you walk into the rug shop, and we have an article on this on, how it goes, but I'll basically tell you, you walk into the rug shop, the first thing they're going to offer you is some regular tea or some apple tea. And then they're going to put on a show for you. They're going to unravel. They're going to have the carpets kind of fly down. They're going to put them in a pile. They're going to find out which patterns are more appealing to you. What colors are more appealing? Do you want silk? Do you want wool? Do you want commercial dyes versus traditional dyes? It's so much fun, and you can be there a good long time.
Plan on spending some time for sure.
It's not something that you're going to waltz in and say, I'm just looking, and then waltz out. That means you don't really want anything, and they know that. But if you really do want to buy a carpet, Cappadocia, I would say is one of the best places to do that.
And they won't get upset if you don't find one. You can sit there for an hour and they'll throw out carpet after carpet after carpet. And they know that you may not find one that is exactly what you're looking for. And they wouldn't buy one that wasn't exactly what they're looking for. So they don't get upset if you don't buy one. Now, if you're going in there just to look at carpets with no intention of buying,
that may not be the most ethical thing to do.
That's not really the nicest thing to do, because it is a lot of work. And they'll feed you. Well, they'll give you chai to drink the whole time. And
sometimes they'll give you dinner.
And our friend in Avanos would sit there and play his sitar for us. Or his Oz, yeah.
And yeah, he would sing for us, and we'd be drinking chai, listening to him play music. And We weren't even talking rugs at that point. We were just having fun with them.
Yeah.
I mean, give the Turks a chance. They're just fun people to be around.
Yeah, some of the friendliest on earth. Well, and that brings me to our favorite restaurant in Turkey.
Oh, yeah. And this is hands down because of the people. I mean, the food is great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. And that's the Dibek in Goreme again. We always
stayed in
Goreme, and I would definitely recommend staying in Goreme. There are other little towns around, but that's the center of everything, and there's no reason to go anywhere else.
Well, that's where you're going to find the majority of the cave hotels, because that's where they are. That's where the balloons take off from. That's where there's lots of restaurants, and the hills are, it's very hilly, and it's just a cool town at night. It's lit up with these amber lights that just sort of glow, and you can see all the, rough exterior of the rock. It's just way cool, let me tell you.
Well, and even the buildings that aren't carved out of the cliffs are quarried rock, and some of them are very ancient and have been around for a very long time. So you feel like have stepped back in history somewhere in the whole village. It's super cool. And the Dibek is one of those older buildings. It's down at the base of the valley. And the food there, like you said, is good. Some of the items are fabulous. Their testi kebab, which just the name itself kind of turns people off. I don't want to eat testi kebab, but testi does not mean like testicles. Testi is the type of clay pot that it's cooked in.
And you do have to order your testi kebab 24 hours in advance. I mean, so here's the thing. You can get testi kebab in other restaurants in Goreme. Some of them, the better ones, and it's just hit or miss if you don't know, they will have had your testi kebab cooking anyway.
Right.
And they're hoping that someone will buy it because it takes such a long time to cook. But what Dibek does, and I think it's the smartest way to do it, is they want you to make a reservation and say, I'm going to have a beef testi, or I'm going to have a chicken testi.
Or lamb.
And what they do is then they will cook yours to be done when you are there, and it'll be perfectly done, and it's just for you. So what you need to do is make a reservation at the Dibek. When you go to your hotel, they'll call for you and say you want however many testes. You have to order the testi kebab 24 hours in advance. So make sure you do that. But anyway, I mean, that's only half the experience. It's a great experience, don't get me wrong, but it's only half the experience.
Yeah. Well, and the rest of it is you're in this ancient building that they've turned into a restaurant, but it's also the family home, and it has been the family home.
It was a barn. It was their barn.
It was originally a barn, and then they converted it. Yeah. But it's been in the family for generations, and it's just a beautiful thing inside. They've got it completely decorated and covered in very, very nice kilim and carpets, and of course copper and all that cool stuff. But they also make their own wine, and their wine is incredible. And they serve it in carafes, and you can just, oh boy, that's hard to stop drinking that wine. It is so good.
And the owner's name is Mehmet, and you will meet Mehmet. He will come out to meet you, and he speaks English perfectly. And Mehmet was actually born in the roof of that building.
Yeah, in the attic.
So he's got stories to tell, and he's a lot of fun. Yeah. Tell him Corinne and Jim sent you.
It's a great place. You will definitely love that. We did mention the underground cities. They're a little bit further from Goreme, but you can again get a tour from your hotel that will take you right to it. Or if you've got your own vehicle, you can easily drive to them. We've got a good map that shows where everything is.
And one of the last things that we did, which has nothing to do with the fairy chimneys, is we used to love to go to the weekend markets there. One of the cutest little towns named Urgup has a Saturday market that is pretty sprawling. And we would go there and find, depending on the season, we definitely would get some cheese or some honeycomb or some grape leaves for stuffing. There's always something that we would get. They have dry stuff in the winter, like dried okra that they pull down in these big, long strings. Just really traditional. People have been going there for years, the vendors, and it's a really great place to walk around. And so it doesn't have much to do with the fairy chimneys. It's just the people who live there.
Right. And it's not a tourist market.
It's not a tourist market at all. It's for the locals.
It's their market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the carved spoons, the wooden spoons. Those are really cool. It's one of my favorite things to find in a market. Or the bells, the little goat bells or cow bells. I love those little bells, like brass bells. Those are cool.
Yeah, well, there's lots of cool things. Turkey's definitely one of those places that you're not going to come home empty-handed, I guarantee you. It's just not going to happen. At any rate, you want to go to Cappadocia because Cappadocia is just an otherworldly, magical, exotic, and someplace that you can't find anywhere else in the world. And it's so much fun to go there and meet the people and just hang out. And don't just spend one day there. Don't do a whirlwind tour. I don't think you can get as much out of it. You'll still enjoy the fairy chimneys and there's plenty of places that we haven't even mentioned. Rose Valley, Alara Valley. I mean, Passabog Overlook. Just tons and tons and tons and tons of places to go. There's things to do, and you are going to love it.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.